My name is Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor, but the world knows me as Queen Elizabeth II. Today, I want to share with you the story of my early years as Queen, particularly around the time I was 30 years old, when the weight of the crown was still relatively new upon my head. I never expected to become Queen so early in my life. My father, King George VI, passed away on February 6, 1952, when I was just 25 years old. I was in Kenya with my husband Philip when I received the news that would change my life forever. I went up a tree as a princess and came down as a queen. The transition was sudden and overwhelming. I had two young children at the time, Charles, who was only 3, and Anne, who was just 1. Balancing my roles as a mother and as the new monarch of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth was perhaps my greatest challenge. My coronation took place on June 2, 1953, at Westminster Abbey. It was a solemn and sacred ceremony, steeped in tradition dating back 1,000 years. It was also a moment of modernization. My coronation was the first to be televised, allowing millions around the world to witness this ancient ceremony. I wore the St. Edward's crown, which weighs nearly 5 pounds, a physical reminder of the burden of responsibility I was undertaking. In the years that followed, as I approached the age of 30, I embarked on numerous Commonwealth tours. In 1953, Philip and I embarked on a 6-month tour, visiting Australia, New Zealand, and various territories across the Commonwealth. I became the first reigning monarch to visit these nations, strengthening the bonds between our countries during a time of great change in the post-war world. My daily life as a young queen involved a careful balance. Each morning began with the review of government papers delivered in the famous red boxes. I held regular audiences with my Prime Minister, Winston Churchill initially, and then Anthony Eden and Harold Macmillan. These experienced statesmen guided me through the complexities of governance during my early reign. The 1950s were a period of significant change. The British Empire was transforming into the Commonwealth, and I was determined to be a unifying figure during this transition. In 1957, I addressed the United Nations General Assembly, emphasizing the importance of international cooperation in an increasingly interconnected world. At home, Philip and I welcomed 2 more children to our family, Andrew in 1960 and Edward in 1964. Despite the demands of my position, I always prioritized my role as a mother. We tried to give our children as normal an upbringing as possible within the constraints of royal life. One of my greatest challenges during these early years was finding my voice as a monarch. I was young, younger than many of the advisors and officials surrounding me, and female in what was still very much a man's world. Yet I was determined to fulfill my duty with dignity and dedication. I made a promise on my 21st birthday, before I became queen, that my whole life, whether it be long or short, would be devoted to service. As I navigated those early years on the throne, that promise was my guiding light. It remains so to this day. The 1950s were not without their difficulties. The Suez Crisis of 1956 tested British foreign policy and my government. The relationship between the monarchy and the media was also evolving, with increasing public interest in the royal family's private lives. Yet there were many joyful moments too. I developed my passion for horses during this time and began the tradition of the annual Royal Variety performance. I also established the tradition of the Christmas broadcast, speaking directly to my people across the Commonwealth. Looking back on those early years of my reign, I see a young woman thrust into an extraordinary position, learning to navigate her role while the world watched. The crown may have seemed heavy at times, but it was the support of my family, particularly my husband Philip, and the loyalty of my subjects that gave me strength. The oath I took at my coronation was not for a few years, but for my entire life. The promise of service I made has guided me through decades on the throne, from those early days as a young queen of 30 to the present day. It is a promise I continue to honor with every duty I perform.